What's up, guys? We're back with part 2 of the NZ Set 5 Resurrection set review. We went through the styled cards in the first half. That's a lengthy video, but there's a lot of good content there. Make sure if you haven't checked it out that you check that out as well. I'll make sure to put a link to that in the description of this video. But for now, we're going to cover the freestyle cards and the personalities included in this set and wrap it all up. I'm just going to get right started here. So our first card, Heroic Deeds. Much to the name of the Resurrection set, if you somehow are here and missed the kind of first half of the video, the kind of gimmick of this set is that we resurrected some of Retro's virtual cards into either sort of like direct copies or slightly altered to do something closer to what we were looking for in our kind of meta. Some of theirs worked better for how the game played kind of then, and things have just changed a little bit, or we had different player types, etc. So we changed some cards a little bit. This is the first of those that we did. This card was originally called Gohan's Heroic Deeds, and it was a heroes only attack that just shuffled a drill, energy attack that shuffled a drill into their deck. This one, as you can see, does a little bit more than that. It's heroes only energy attack. You can shuffle a card in play into its owner's life deck. Now, parenthetical there says you can't name a main personality card, a Dragon Ball, a Sensei, or a Mastery with this, which just makes a lot of sense, right? Dragon Balls are kind of always immune to getting picked by stuff unless a card says you can, and then you're obviously not going to shuffle a personality, or like an MP or a Sensei or Mastery into someone's deck. That's just not ever going to be a thing that happens, but it's on there to make sure that no one ever has any questions. But really, it's an energy attack for 4. Damage on this card, literally doesn't matter. It's cool that it is there, I guess, but it's never why you're using this. Shuffling a card back into your opponent's deck is such a wide net. You can shuffle, an attached Black Exertion or something to turn your endurance back on. You can shuffle City in Turmoil back into a deck. You can shuffle Winter Countryside with one of the other MPs in this set. There's cards that they'll use too that you can deal with. There's just a lot of different cards that could be on the table. Maybe some of it's a card that stays in play to be used a second time or something like that. And you can shuffle it in so that doesn't get used again. You can shuffle a drill, a non-combat like a Bulma Scouter or something, or a Hero's Lucky Break. Any of those type of cards that sit on the table. Really strong thing. You can shuffle in a 20's Absorbing Drill, and then this attack will be successful. And then you can keep going if you're an Energy Beats kind of thing. There's just so many things that you can do with this, and it helps heroes out a lot. In this league, we have limited Caught Off Guard Drill to 1 copy. The card's just really, really, really strong, but that is a notable hit to some of the value that heroes get. And then when you compare Confrontation to Stare Down or stuff like that, there's debates on which of those is better. So this is just a nice way to kind of support hero and give them some one more little tool that lets them disrupt gameplay states a little bit more. Those cards turned out to just be awesome. I think if you have a deck that is concerned about a particular card being in play, you should have this in your deck.
Yeah, a lot of styles really struggle with interactions with non-combats, or some of them struggle with interactions with allies, and just this kind of the wide net cast by this to where this is a freestyle card first off that can act as removal for whatever it is that you're struggling with. I mean, I've seen Ball decks hat for this to shuffle in City in Turmoil. You get such a range, right? This protects you from exertion, as you mentioned. It can slow down your opponent's other attached cards, or sometimes you just shuffle in some little modifier to save yourself some damage. This card is very strong. It's basically a card you're going to want to play in most heroes decks. It just the wide range of cards that it answers makes it always very strong. The next card up is Android Apocalypse Drill. So this is a non-combat. It says your allies in play with Android in the titles cannot be discarded or removed from play. If you put this card into your hand during combat with a card effect, you can place it into play instead. So most people know, the general idea of how the Android package works. It uses cards like 16 Smiles and Android 13's Prepared Stance to get Android cards from your deck or discard pile and put them into your hand. This is a card kind of that goes in that same, basic concept, except with this card allowing you to put it in play, you can do it for more ally protection. So if you're on a an Android 20 deck or something like that, or even like an Android 13 deck that really cares about having your allies, this will protect those allies. Otherwise, the card being searchable is where its real power is. I mean, if you don't always have targets for your 16 smiles and stuff like that when you use them. So, just putting this card immediately into play could be a benefit, even if you only have 14 as your only ally, which, again, and 14 is one of the best allies in the game. So it's an ally you're going to play in most Android decks.
This is another one of the resurrected retro cards. The retro version just ended at the end of the first sentence, where your just allies can't be discarded or removed with Android. We added that if you put this into your hand in combat, you can place it into play instead. Androids really do need some love. So getting, like Nick said, to be able to pull this off of a Smiles or something like that and then put it immediately into play is very cool and a great way to be able to protect your allies. It just adds a little bit more of a level of functionality to the card without making it too much of an issue. The androids could use the help, and this does a good job of helping them with it, I think. Then we've got Frantic Restraint. This is a physical combat card. Physical attack doing +3 power stages of damage. It has him power 4, so it's got a pretty big floor just of damage on it. But if your opponent has 3 or more non-combat cards in play, your opponent's freestyle non-combat cards cannot be used for the remainder of combat. Removed from the game after use. So just sort of like a couple of the cards we've mentioned before, getting to turn off your opponent's ability to use some of their non-combat cards can really help overcome some of the strength of decks like that. Those sort of stall, stasis end combat, run away and hide decks use a lot of those non-combats to do that kind of thing. And if you can turn those off, you get a lot of value out of that. It has Empower 4, which means that there's in the instance that your opponent doesn't have 3 or more cards in play that will count towards this, you can just throw it for big damage, which is nice. And it's just kind of got that because this really is like a hyper-focused kind of support card. This sees a little bit of play in some Sensei decks. I think it's still very, very narrow, and the decks you'll want it against, you'll use it, and the decks that you think, or the decks that will want this are pretty sure they would. It's not a card that I think goes into everything, or even into a lot of things, but I think it's useful. I think it's good just sort of floor power level if you need it to be, but having a little bit of control over sort of turning off some of the things your opponent can do to disrupt your gameplay is really strong. I mean, we all know how good that Boost Fury and stuff is, right? And this is sort of an additional Boost Fury.
Yeah, the floor on this just being physical for 3 stages 4 cards is pretty good. That's really what you got to look at with these really narrow secondary effects is how good is the floor, and the damage on this attack is good. So that's really helpful, and generally speaking, I don't put this card in a lot of main decks. I do feel like this is more of a Sensei deck card, because if the secondary part is never on, it's probably not something you want. But, this can turn off things like Goku's Capturing Drill, and some various things like that too. So Hercule's Dream Sequence is the one that immediately pops to mind to me, is oh, okay, well, you can't Hercule's Dream Sequence to stop this and stop all my attacks basically. So it's got its uses, and it like Derek said, it's a narrow Sensei deck card, but it is strong in the matchups where it's good. Okay, next up on the list we have a fan favorite amongst the league here, which is the Van. So the Van has a parenthetical that says this card's name is also considered to be the car for card effects. And while attached, this card is considered to be a location for card effects instead of a non-combat. Attached to your Android 16, 17, or 18, while attached when entering combat, draw a card. You can only have 1 copy of the Van in play. So that last line often gets overlooked, but it does say in play. So that's a little interesting little, play back and forth there. You can't bring out your second one while your first one's in play. Not a huge deal normally. So most people are aware that the androids in the Cell Saga, especially 17 and 18, cared about having the car in play. Well, the problem with that is that the car was kind of terrible. So what we wanted to do here was make a card that was also the car. And so something that actually could give value to these characters. Most people understand that these androids are a little bit underplayed. They're a little bit weaker because, they just don't have the correct powers to go along with their abilities. 17 is able to go get the car, which is great. And 18 has an unblockable energy attack if you have it in play. So there's some value, there's some payoff to putting it into play. And just drawing a card when in combat is always good, right? So the parenthetical, the reason for that is, like any non-combat that's an attached card, it just gets removed by a lot of random effects, right? A lot of, discard and removal for non-combats. Some of these decks you're not going to have a ton of non-combats in play, so it's just going to always get hit by whatever random card they throw. So it counting as a location in play means that they have to have very specific cards to get rid of this. Off the top of my head, Heroic Deeds, which you just saw, and there's like Black Planet Destruction, and then there's a couple of more narrow cards like Land and Pain and various things like that can get rid of it. I think Land and Pain works here. Dimension Scream maybe. But those are cards that aren't really good enough to see play in most decks. So this card, a lot of the times when it gets on the battlefield, it's going to stick. And so taking an Android 17 or an Android 18 and turning their power into when entering combat, draw a card plus get the effect on the card. Now this is a reasonable personality you can play. The van's been great. It's obviously an auto include if you're playing 16, 17, or 18. I've seen some people play it in decks where they're allies. I think that's a little cute. But if one of these three is your MP, you should have the van in your deck.
Agreed. This card is sort of single-handedly opened up seeing some other decks be played. We've seen a couple of different 17 decks be played. 18's kind of always seen some play, but it's seen a little bit more. 16 is still sort of at the mercy of he's just not got a great level 1. So assuming that happens one of these days, I think 16 would see some good use of this too. But an important thing to note is that it is a location for card effects, not for game mechanics. And that question does come up fairly regularly, but it isn't like if I have this card attached and then you play a location or battleground, it doesn't replace this and discard it like a normal location would, because it doesn't follow the game mechanic rules of locations. It's just specifically for your opponent's card effects of being able to remove one of them. Nicknamed most of the ones that work. I don't actually think Land and Pain does, because I think that's just battlegrounds.
Is it just battlegrounds?
But everything else is basically the list of things that can hit this. So like you said, it's just very safe having it attached. There's not a ton of cards that will get played that can hit this, especially if your opponent's a villain and they're not going to have a Heroic Deeds. You're just sort of confident this is going to be around. If your opponent is a hero and they want to burn a Deeds on, draw a card once a turn, that's pretty good to get rid of, but it also means that they're not burning it on something else that you have, like one of your allies or your Android attack drill or anything like that. So there's some merit to that too. This card had been asked for. This is NZ 5 here, and it had been asked for in every one of the sets. So we were really excited to finally get it made. I think, I know that draw a card is sort of the easy button of text to tack on to the end of something to make it better, but I think it actually does really do a lot for the Android stacks in letting them utilize the sort of Android package that they're drawing through and the amount of deck that they have to kind of spend on some of that Android package stuff. Getting to draw an extra card just helps kind of mitigate some of the impact that a package that large, in addition to whatever your style is, has on your overall hand flow. So I think this card's awesome. It's like Nick said, it's been great. It's put in a ton of work. People love it. It's one of my favorite NZ cards. I think this card's great. It's done so much to make androids more playable. We're getting into Tapion Swordplay Drill here. Spoiler. If you declare to Tokawaza, your non-drill cards with sword in the title are considered styled cards that match your Tokawaza. So anything that you have that is that isn't a drill, that is It has sword and title, matches your Tokuwaza for your mastery, for any of that kind of stuff. So all if you're say you're playing like a black sword deck now in Trunk Saga, now you're getting +2/+2 on all of your sword cards without having to have your swordplay drill out, which helps a ton for Gohan's swordplay drill, which helps a lot for having the kind of damage output that sword decks can have trouble setting up. If you're playing it in blue, it can trigger your um, uh, it can trigger like Blue Majin Buu Saga, which is neat too because if this is out, it means that all of the sword cards in your discard pile might also work for removing for the mastery prevention effect. It also works for the damage buff, so you get some benefit there. So you're playing it in red, and you have a red card on top of your discard pile. That's now relevant for some of the mastery effects. So there's a lot of things that this can work with. In orange, of course, too. With the World Game Saga Mastery, it makes each of your sword attacks stack the life card modifier on the mastery. So there's a lot of things that this does. It's at the end of the day, it's still just a drill. It doesn't have any like native protection or anything, so it comes and goes. But while it's out, this card does a lot for the the styled sword decks. Obviously, there's always been a freestyle Trunks sword, or even kind of freestyle Bookworm Gohan or something. But it's very rare that you see a styled sword deck. And this card, I think, helps a lot with making that more of a reality.
So yeah, the reason that sword decks are generally freestyle is mainly because Devastation Drill is so strong. Basically, this card is to give you some sort of incentive to move away from Devastation Drill decks and into decks that are not freestyle styled. You know, Derek gave some of the major examples like Blue and BS. I think is a really good example. I think the amount of cards that you can surprisingly get value out of from that is really high. Obviously, Derek mentioned the spoiler, and you know it benefits to mention this now. But you'll see when Tapion is revealed here that he definitely gets a lot of use out of this card. And so we can talk about it a little bit more when we get there, but this is definitely a Tapion-inspired card.
Yeah. What, 6 Tapion cards in the set? What does that mean? Anyway, here's Sacred World of the Kais.
Alright, so Sacred World of the Kais is the location. And it says whenever a personality is at a power rating above 0, it's considered to have a power rating of Z. So those of you who have played a lot with Z characters know that being in Z is insanely good. Now, it does come and go a little bit. You know, if one person's in Z, then it doesn't matter what the other person is as a general rule. What this location does is it always encourages that, right? So, you know, if you're playing against Majin Buu or one of the, you know, DBS Super Broly, one of the stronger personalities, being in Z is really good. You know, it takes them to 2 on all their pat, and you can keep control of the damage, keep the damage down. What this does is even if they knock you to 0, they're still in Z as well. So you're really keeping the pat damage down a lot. This is basically for MPs that are going to be in B the whole time. Anybody who's going to be in B the whole time, if you are like an energy deck and you're trying to negate some damage, this is a good spot for you. Or if you're a physical deck and you can play this, and then you're getting +2 on all your attacks against somebody like Boo, which is a huge swing. So I know I've tried this in like some of the TN decks that are physical beats based, and just any other various like B personality that likes to do physical beats. This is a card you can always consider there. And the opposite effect that you know, your opponent's attacks are going to do less generally when this card is good, and your attacks are going to do more is super good. If you are on like Nimbus Cloud or something like that that searches for locations, you know, this is a great target to play one of, because the times in the matchups where this card is good, it is very good. Obviously, if your opponent's in B, it's not nearly as good. So a lot of times this is going to find its way into your Sensei deck instead of your main deck, which is fine. But in the matchups where, you know, your opponent's really strong and you are, you know, not so strong, this card could be really powerful for you.
Yeah, I think you nailed this one. It is it's really good when you need it. If you don't, it's one of those that there's like, why would I have this? But I think the number of times that I've been happy to have this, I've been more than thrilled about. I think the fact that it's, as long as one person isn't, like, as long as both people aren't at Z, someone is in Z. So that does a lot. Even if you get pushed to Z and they're still at like full, they're still in Z, and so you're still just doing two, is super important and does a lot for damage mitigation. The toughest part I think with this card is is finding out if it's worth more to you than the card your deck would like normally run. You know, Nick mentioned that this makes you take less physical damage against like big physical decks or whatever, and that's very, very true. And that helps as an energy deck. You know, you take two off of the pat instead of six or something, and so it can mean the difference between getting to throw in a couple attacks or not. But so does Lonely Canyon, right? And so it's like, well, is that the one I want, or is this? Or if you're playing, if you have this card and you're a physical beats deck and you're in B or something, well, then is it like, do I want this, or do I want Tree of Might, which gives me the 2 extra damage and then draws me a drill or something? So there's just like sometimes a little bit of debate about where this would feel right over certain other ones, but I think the times that it does, it really does feel good. I've liked it in most of the cases where I found homes for it, and it's one that I'm like happy exists despite the fact that it doesn't see a ton of play. It's one that I'm really happy to know I have access to. It's situational, but the situations are there, and I'm glad it exists when they come up.
One last thing about this that I forgot to mention here. One spot where I really like this card is if you're playing a sand deck and you're weak. So a lot of people are unfamiliar with the rules of Z, but the rules of Z say that you can choose, if you play a card that cares about who's stronger or how much stronger or something like that, you can choose the power levels, right? So if you're playing, Sand Cliff Slam or any of those Broly subset cards that are like, if your main personality has a higher power rating, well, while this is in play, any of those cards you use are always on, which is super strong. And just the opposite, Hercule's Dream Sequence is always on. So it's just something you can consider there. It kind of turns on all of those effects, and if you're going to play a deck that likes those kind of effects, because those cards are innately pretty strong, then this could be the location for you.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. We have Dismal Future up next. It is a battleground. Players cannot have more than 4 cards in their hand. When a player would search their life deck, they search the top 6 cards instead. I think if ever there was a card that you could sort of tell me why I made it without being the person who made it, I think you could look at this card and said, this card hates Broly, right? And the answer is yes. Broly, as is historically true, is a very, very strong deck, Saiyan Broly specifically. And he has a huge hand, and every turn he uses Electrified to search his deck for whatever card he wants, normally Beef to beef you for 3 straight combats until you're dead. 6. But this just says, if you're going to search your deck, you're just going to look at the top 6 instead, which is a lot worse than searching 75. And 4 is a lot worse than 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever that some of the Saiyan decks have. If they say they truce card, I'm like, well, you don't get to keep double your hand now, because you only get to have 4 cards. So the way that this works mechanically is if you get to 4 cards and you have to keep drawing, you just don't get to draw the cards into your hand. So if they have their 3 cards in hand, or even 4, they enter combat and they've got their Saiyan Cell Saga Mastery, they discard the card for the Mastery, and then they can't draw any cards. If they're at 3 cards in hand and enter, they discard a card, draw 1 card, and then don't draw the second, etc., etc. This card puts in an absurd amount of work. It is incredible, and the decks that need to mitigate the amount of hand space that you have, this card is very, very good at doing it. This card's great in black, where they want to be discarding your hand. Capping the amount of cards you can have in your hand makes hand destruction a lot stronger. Looking at 6, is a little bit of a cost for some decks where they would normally get to search on their own too, but most decks that would play this are perfectly happy making their searches a little bit worse to make yours a lot worse. They're not going to play many cards that would care to search the deck, or at least not that deep, and the payoff of the 4 cards and much, much worse search is so high. One little fun thing you can do with this is you can play this in the Gatefold Majin Vegeta. and his power is stop physical attack, search the top 3 of your deck for a Majin style card. This searches the top 6 because you searched your deck. Any of those effects like that search the top 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, they do 6. So that's a little bit nice too. So there are some kind of sneaky pros that you can give yourself through that effect, but most of the time this is a very restrictive, putting everyone on the same playing field, hand size wise and search function wise.
So, like any effect for both players, the goal is to make the restrictions or the benefits more one-sided than they're intended to be. Like Derek said earlier about black, really liking this card. Blue also really likes this card. Red also really likes this card. This card is really rough for Saiyan and Namekian to deal with most of the time. It's also surprisingly good against freestyle because it basically kills their mastery, which is great. So, this is one of those cards that half the decks in the format love it and half the decks in the format absolutely hate it. It is very oppressive and very strong. It's right up there with City and Turmoil as far as, like, if you're playing against a deck that this card is good against and it stays in play a few turns, they're going to lose. And that's generally all there is to say about it, right? So if you're playing a Saiyan deck and a Namekian deck, one of these types of decks, you have to have answers for this card. You have to know this card exists, and you have to be ready to play against it. If you sleeve up a Saiyan Broly deck and you've got 2 City and Turmoils and no other way to get rid of Dismal Future, you're probably going to lose, and you deserve to. You have to be prepared, because this is a card that will absolutely just beat you every time.
It is incredibly, incredibly strong. If you're a deck that wants to draw cards and be searching your deck and kind of stringing searches and combos and stuff together, you have to be so aware that this card exists. I say we made like a NZ primer video thing for last year's Midwest Melee event in 2024, and in that video we were like, if there's one set of cards or whatever that you like, if there's just a couple NZ cards you learn about, one of them is know that the spheres or the negations are just styled spheres, and 2, know that this card exists. It does so much against the decks that it hurts, and if you're just playing old school score like you used to, this card's gonna make you look a lot like Gohan there, so need to be able to deal with this one.
So up next, we're into our personality cards, and so these are some of the level 1s we printed. These are new level 1s, and I'll let Derek get into a little bit of the lore behind some of these, because a lot of these are retro reprints, and I'll talk more specifically about kind of how they fit into the meta. So this is level 1, Nail at All Costs. He has a parenthetical that says that Piccolo is considered to be in play for card effects. He's got a PUR of 2, and his power is physical for 3 life cards, and for the remainder of combat, physical attacks performed by Nail that do not use the physical attack table do +3 stages and +1 card. So, on his base, this is a physical for 4 life cards and 3 stages. One of the problems is with Nail is that you are going to want to lead on this most of the time. That can be unfortunate with Gohan's Kick and Fury floating around. Thankfully, those cards don't interact with this power, so if you want to lead on them, you can still lead on them. So that is a little bit of a benefit. The Piccolo is considered to be in play for card effects. There is a card effect that cares about that. It's a Namekian card. I believe it's called Namekian Dash Attack that says if Piccolo and Nail are in play, it does 8 life cards. So with Nail's power, it would do 9 life cards and 3 power stages. Obviously, this is a really strong card. Nail is kind of, at this point in the game, the premier Namekian physical beats character. This power is very good. Namekian has a lot of big physicals that don't use the pat. They have a lot of really there's a lot of interesting Namekian cards that play really well with Nail. He's been great, especially in Tough Enough. He does only have 3 levels, unfortunately, so he is more of a Tough Enough personality. But the Namekian World Games deck with Nail as its MP and just throwing big physicals with his power has been a really competitive deck, and it's nice to see Namekian get a little bit more into the physical game.
Yeah, it's fun too when you see a character in B be a good physical MP. That's always exciting. This card, like Nick said, with some sort of background behind it, this was released in Retro's 2015 set. It was released as Piccolo Samurai, and the parenthetical said, Nail is considered to be in play for card effects. We thought, as we were reviewing the card, we were like, the the art has like Piccolo and like some samurai clothes or something like from Naruto or something or other, which we were like, it's silly, whatever, move on. But we read it again and we're like, this card's actually really cool. Unfortunately, I don't actually think that Piccolo needs a new level 1. Um, I think he's like fine there. I think the Saiyan Saga Piccolo that draws a card or whatever is good. The puppet is good for the decks that care. I just don't really know that Piccolo's like itching for a new level 1. And like, if we just flip it to male and Piccolo is considered in play, now you have like a really cool male personality, which kind of brings him back onto the table. And as we talked about it more, we're like, I think that's it. And then we put him together, play tested him, and he turned out awesome. And like Nick said, he is, actually competitive. This card's really good. There's a lot of places you can play him in, not just Namekian, which is cool. Although he obviously is great there because of his parenthetical and stuff. But I just think this card is really awesome and has made Nail like a really playable dude. And it's fun to see that. Nail was way back in the day, real strong contender versus like Goldo and stuff. So it's neat to see him kind of pick back up the throne of iconic beats physical MP character for Namekians. Here we have Chaozu to the limit. He has a constant combat power that is when entering combat, you may search your life deck for a physical combat or energy combat card with technique, specifically technique, or move in the title and put it into your hand. This card was also released in the Retro 2015 set and was released as Piccolo as Goku Sage Ninja, and he's like Goku in like some Naruto clothes. And we were like, a thing that like cares about the straining cards and stuff is a really fun idea. But just like the Piccolo card, we didn't need a new Goku. There's a million Gokus, there's a million types of Gokus you can play for different stuff. And we were like, let's find a character that like really could lean into this. And as we were thinking about it, we're like, well, this character doesn't quite do it, or maybe it could be that. Maybe it's like a Majin Vegeta or something, because he like strains and like blows himself up with this like boom. And then we were like, oh my god, what if we do Chaozu? Because Chaozu's whole thing is he just blows up. He just strains himself and dies. So we were like, let's make it a Chaozu card. So there could be a Chaozu deck in the game. And we thought it just seemed pretty funny to have a character whose like entire lineage or entire legacy in the show is attached to Nappa and Explode. So much so that it's the power of his level 2 is Explode and lose the game. But we're like, that's perfect for a straining deck. And so as we put it together, grabbing the straining cards and stuff was cool. But it turns out there's also just a ton of cards with move in the title. There's cards with technique in the title. And it just made for some like really interesting searches and things that you could do to build a very unexplored deck archetype. I'll let Nick get like a little more in depth with it. He has played the hell out of this deck to great success, and he knows the front and back of it like his hand. So I'm gonna let him take over.
So obviously the straining deck is something you can do. I question exactly how strong that is. I mean, there's the straining move that does extra life cards for each straining card in your discard pile. I think that could be a deck, and I think it's fairly reasonable. But the Chaozu deck that I built based around this personality was based around Dragon's Victory. For those of you who don't know, Dragon's Victory is a combat card. It says if your anger's at 4, basically, and if your opponent's anger's at 3 or 4, you win the game. So the straining moves are well known for raising your opponent's anger level. So the kind of game plan is you use Chaozu's power to get your straining moves to set your opponent's anger up so that you can get them with Dragon's Victory. The deck's been quite successful at doing that. The power actually has some really interesting hits. There's a straining move that's a physical attack that discards all your opponent's drills. Obviously strong. There's one that levels your opponent, which is obviously strong. There's one that ends combat, which is also obviously strong. And the big one that I like to use, I'm blanking on the name currently, but it is from the Frieza Saga, and it is stops all energy attacks, costs 2 life cards to use. So you get a 3 of Nappa's Energy Ore that cost a couple life cards to use that you can fetch with your power. So a lot of these the technique and move cards are incredibly strong, and so you can play Chiaotzu in kind of a control deck where you're trying to use his power to play defense and try to set up, and then you get him with Dragon's Victory, or you play something like Eternal Dragon's Quest to set up some Dragon Balls. The Dragon Balls are also super helpful for setting your anger to the appropriate stages. It is kind of a combo deck, kind of a control deck, but like bringing Chiaotzu into the game is something I was very happy with. Chiaotzu is one of my favorite personalities in the game just because of how random and strange he is. So I really enjoy this. I enjoy the deck a lot. It's a blast to play, and I like all decks that basically have a lot of decision making in it, and there's a surprising complexity to the decision making in Chiaotzu.
Yeah, that's super well said. One thing that I mentioned when I was kind of reading it at first, where it says like specifically technique, one thing this can't grab is Hercule's Amazing Techniques. This game does, when it says it's looking for a card with that in the name, it is looking for exactly that word and not a word that has that in it. So you can't grab Hercule's Amazing Techniques with this card, which is good. Fetchable hat off of your personality power is probably unreasonably strong. So it's nice that that didn't work out that way. But this is a cool card. It allows for a lot of really interesting stuff.
So the next MP is Chiaotzu's buddy, Tien the Crane Master. So he has a PR of 3. His constant combat power is when entering combat, you may draw a card. If that card is Tien named, you can discard it to draw another card. Your Tien named cards that are removed from the game after use are discarded instead, and you can pay life cards of your Tien named cards or you can pay cost of your Tien named cards in life cards instead of power stages. So several things are going on here. First of all, he's got a PR of 3, which is insanely high. Second off, if you look at his power levels, he is in C from 1 above to 8 above, and then D at his top 2 stages. That's incredibly strong. There's not a ton of D personalities floating around there, which is helpful because obviously this is an energy personality, so he's going to defend really well as somebody with a really good power level. When entering combat, draw a card. I mean, we've seen Goku exist. Goku's perfectly playable, and that's all his power does, basically. So sometimes the Tien decks, a lot of them are freestyle, but a lot of them have to play some maybe not the best cards in the world to get enough Tien name cards to do everything you want to do. So being able to discard if you draw a bad one to go get another one is pretty useful. And then the remove from the game effect from your Tien name cards is also really strong because a lot of the Tien cards care about Tien cards in your discard pile. So, you have Tien's Flight, which is a physical that does +1 life card for each Tien name card in your discard pile. Super helpful if you're not removing them. And then there's also an energy attack that if when you perform it, if you remove some Tien name cards from your discard pile, you can put it back in your hand. So you can chain together big attacks. You can also pay for that card with your life cards to continue to fuel your discard pile to do more Tien attacks. Tien at print instantly became one of the better energy personalities in the game. The Tien name card package is incredibly strong. He got a lot of help from cards like Left Leg Check, Blank's Left Leg Check, and things like that too. Tien is a personality. If you just want to play a generic energy deck that can be pretty good, he's a good choice for it. Last thing, the PUR deck that exists, that's a blue-based deck, a lot of times sees Yamcha as the MP. The other great MP for it is Tien, which is kind of fun that Yamcha and Tien are kind of the 2 personalities for the deck, in my opinion. But so yeah, Tien is a great personality. If you want to play energy decks, man, this is a great choice to play him.
Yeah, man, he's just so explosive. He does so much cool stuff. He moves cards around a lot. He lets you do different stuff with those cards. Draws you cards. He lets you pay costs weird. Like, he's just really exciting to play. He is tit for tat copy of the Tien the Crane Master from Retro in their 2013 set. The only difference between him is their Tien the Crane Master also has an 800,000 power stage. He was an 11 stage personality there. He's 10 stages here. But he is definitely not hurting by not having that 11th stage. This card is fantastic. And like Nick said, if you're wanting to play an energy deck, Tien is literally one of the best choices you can make. Brings us to Videl the Hellion. This is also a retro card as well, and one that was I mentioned earlier Namekian Insult being one of the cards that really made us want to do this project. This card was kind of the other one. It is a level 1. It has a constant combat power that says your attacks deal +1 life card of damage for each villain personality in play. And if a personality has Majin in its printed title, your attacks deal +2 life cards of damage for each villain in play instead. So you just get to stack some damage up there. Now it does have a parenthetical effect that says if this is a part of your MP stack, your opponent's personalities are considered to be villains, and Majins for your card effects for the remainder of the game. Now, notably, they don't have Majin in their title, so not super important for this particular part of the effect with the like +2 life cards instead. But it does trigger all of her, making all of your attacks do +1 life because now they're all villains, regardless of if they are or not. But then there are plenty of Videl named cards that say like if this is used against a Majin, do something, and this turns all of those on. This is a card that people were really excited about in the retro days. They also made a level 4 for her, which admittedly like does a lot for carrying like kind of the back end of this deck too. But the level 1 was like the thing that people were really excited about when it was around. So we were excited to kind of bring it back here too. It makes Videl a lot more playable than she was. It opens her up to being able to be played in most colors. The damage mod just applies to kind of everything. She's got named cards in most styles, and then they're basically all better than they were because of her parenthetical effect. I think this stage is just awesome. I think that Videl is still fine, generally. She's not she's worse at doing the thing she does, just being like a physical beats kind of deck or whatever thing, than a lot of other decks. But if you're like really excited to play Videl, this card really makes it not like a throwaway idea to do so. I think that that's still a perfectly playable deck. I don't know that it's going to like win a tournament or whatever, but I think that Videl, with this card as your level 1, is a deck that you'll still have fun playing and getting to use all the new things that she can utilize.
Yeah, so earlier we talked about Sacred World of the Kais, and Videl is a perfect Sacred World of the Kai personality. She's a B level, physical beats personality. So when I've played Videl, I think the goal is generally to get to level 2. The important part of this deck is the parenthetical, and it says for the remainder of the game. So when you can get to a level 2, then your power is a focus physical that does +4/+4, which obviously is insanely strong power. So that's the way I generally prefer to do it. Videl is surprisingly good against ally decks. Note that her level 1 says that for each villain personality in play, and all of them are villains. So if they've got a couple of allies out, her modifier could be +4/+5 life cards with a few villains out. So obviously that could also be incredibly strong. So there's a couple avenues where she feels pretty good. Unfortunately for Videl, she suffers from, card economy problems. She can't play the styles that draw a bunch of cards, and so she's going to not have big hand sizes, and her attacks, of course she's in B, so her attacks are not going to be great. I do think she needs a little bit of help, but she is like a reasonable choice if you want to just play something fun, some physical beat personality. Like, you could do a lot worse than Videl. The abilities are good enough, and there are matchups where she's going to feel great. If your opponent, as far as physical beats personalities to jam into Majin Buu, it doesn't get a whole lot better than Videl. And various other Majins like that, any kind of Majin thing, she's going to get a huge bonus from being against a printed Majin. I actually ran into this playing Pui Pui in an event when my opponent played Videl, and I'm like, oh crap, and then I played my Majin Buu ally, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, my attack's 2/4, and I'm like, oh man. So there's some scary things she can do here against ally decks, especially against Majin specific decks. But Videl's not quite like top tier or anything like that, but she's totally playable. If you like Videl, or you want to give a female of the Dragon Ball Z universe a shot, Videl's definitely a good choice for that. All right. So the next level we have is Future Trunks Youth. So Future Trunks Youth is all in B. His PUR is 1, which is not really relevant. This is a very unique card that has went through a ton of overlap and changes, and this is kind of where we're at right now. His parenthetical is that if Future Gohan is your MP, this card cannot leave play. Just can't leave play at all. It can't take control of combat or have damage redirected to it, and it does not need to be in control of combat to use this power. So his power is your Saiyan style drills are not discarded when you advance a level, and you can have 2 Saiyan style drills in play that are the same name. Your Saiyan style attacks gain. You may raise your anger 1. Okay, so a few things here. Obviously, this ally only works for Future Gohan, right? So this is a Future Gohan only card, basically. He can't take control of combat. He can't have damage redirected to him. So he is an ally, but the only benefits you get are cards that specifically care about having allies in play. One of the more notable ones is like Saiyan Dual Rushdown. Is a card because of the wording on Future Gohan. Future Gohan's mostly going to be a Saiyan deck. So, and of course, this Future Trunks cares about Saiyan cards as well. So this is a Saiyan card. Your drills not being discarded when you advance the personality level and being to have 2 at a time, that is also a nod to Future Gohan. Future Gohan's level 1 says you can have 2 of the same Saiyan style drill in play, but he does want a level because Future Gohan's level 1 is a defense shield. As we know, defense shields are not very good, but his level 2 is quite good and his level 3 is insanely good. So Trunks giving him the anger to help level him up has certainly been super helpful for him. At this point in time, I believe that Future Gohan is one of the better decks in a lot of the formats. I think you could reasonably play him in both standard and tough enough to good success. The cost of this card is really that you have to play South Guy. I don't think that you can just put this in your deck and play it like a regular card. I don't think there's a lot of benefit to that. I think that you have to play South Kai. You have to South Kai for this and put it into play, which is a small cost. It does hamper your Sensei deck numbers and things like that. But the fact that Future Gohan went from, in my opinion, completely and totally unplayable to one of the better decks in the game, or one of at least the most reasonably competitive decks in the game, with just printing this one card has been super great. Him as an ally is probably too good. An ally that can't leave play is too good, but he doesn't need to leave play. Now he's not performing attacks. Like I said, the only way you're going to get any use out of an ally out of him is a card like Saiyan Dual Rushdown. But this deck is cool. What it's done for Future Gohan is really cool. And this is, if you're playing Future Gohan, this card should be in your deck, and you should definitely give Future Gohan a shot. He's really fun.
Yeah, this card is weird in that it is an ally, but it's not for every other reason that allies are. It basically is an extra text box to stick onto your Future Gohan stack, and that's about it. But it lets you use the really cool level 1 effect that he has, as well as getting to use the 2 and 3 that are the good thing he does. So this card is just very cool. I think Future Gohan, Stage Live Future Gohan, whatever, with Saiyan Trunks Saga has always been an iconic deck and is now, much more playable. I think Future Gohan with Saiyan World Game Saga is still really good as well. I don't think I heard you mention it, Nick, but this one here, as it says, is Future Trunks, Future Trunks Youth. This is a specifically different character than Trunks, so you can't play this as a level 1 personality for a Trunks deck. It is just strictly an ally. And then basically, I guess you technically could play this in any, Saiyan deck for the effect, but he'd have to be in control of combat to have the effect do anything, so it would just be mostly bad to have around. So really, it's just a text box for Future Gohan, but it has done a ton of work in being that. Like Nick said, it has seen some changes and some power sort of balances. Before he couldn't leave play, but was still mostly just a regular ally, and that was too good. Getting to use him for redirecting stage damage and performing attacks and stuff, that was obviously strong. He's still around and can't go anywhere, but he doesn't really do anything other than just give some text to Gohan now. But that's not a bad thing. He's awesome, and Future Gohan is really, really fun. We now have Goten Family Kamehameha. This is a level 1 that has a constant combat power that says your cards with Kamehameha in the title are also considered Goten named cards for card effects. You may pay life cards instead of power stages when paying costs to perform energy attacks. Then he has a parenthetical that says if this card is part of your MP stack, your cards with Kamehameha in the title are considered non-styled for Tokugawa requirements for the remainder of the game. So, what does that mean? So, parenthetical first, all of your Kamehameha cards are non-styled. They are now, no longer going to trigger off of like mastery-related bonuses or whatever, but it also means that you can play every color of Kamehameha card in your deck. Which means that this makes Goten the sort of like Kamehameha deck Lord card that deck has kind of been itching to have for all these years. There are things like Empowered Kamehameha and Gohan's... what's the other one? With
Gohan's Super Kamehameha, I believe?
Well, we made a Super Kamehameha. There's another real Kamehameha card. Empowered is one of the big ones. And there's a couple of other Kamehameha. There's a Teamwork Kamehameha. There's like a whole bunch of them. They exist in every style. There's the blue Kamehameha Blast that we just made. There's a lot of different ones that you can play that have good effects. So you get to play all of them in your deck. You can now they're also Goten named, which is relevant for various effects, but also means you could play a freestyle Goten deck where you grab you draw your hand. One of those is now a Kamehameha card that is non-styled and is considered a Goten card, so you can now discard it to your mastery to go grab a different Goten named card, or in this case, a different Kamehameha named card. So you can set that up that way, and you can always use your energy attacks because you can just pay your life card costs, or your stage cost with life cards. This, in theory, will put Kamehameha cards in your discard pile, which is super good for Supreme Kamehameha, Empowered Kamehameha, and then we also made Gohan's Super Kamehameha in a set, and that card is fantastic at shelling out some damage and gives your Kamehameha cards transform in your next action, so you can play them as though they were in your hand, which just sets up some really crazy little strings of iconic named attacks that you can do for the rest of combat. Goten is very good at doing it, and his effect being for the remainder of game means that if you get leveled, your deck isn't like suddenly illegal and you lose. So the part about paying stages and getting them to be Goten named cards is strictly on the level 1. So if he goes to his level 2, that is worse for you. It breaks kind of the idea of what you're doing with the package a little bit, but his level 2s are good too. So it's not like the end of the world like it is for some decks, like Raditz, if you get leveled to 2, hurts real bad. Jace, if you get leveled to like 3, hurts real bad. So it's not quite that bad, but it definitely does take away some of the Kamehameha stuff. But it does still let you keep using your mastery for the idea that you were doing with it. Or I guess not, sorry, it doesn't. It specifically doesn't, but it doesn't break your deck for rules' sake anyway. This card is really cool. And I think still, even with all the love that we've given to the Kamehameha deck, I still think it's kind of slept on. One of the issues, and one of the reasons I sort of think that is I think that TN, that new one we just showed, kind of does the same gimmick. It doesn't use the Kamehameha cards, but it does the string together energy attacks for free, or at least for the cost of your life deck, into caring about how many of them are in your discard pile. It sort of does that same gimmick, but with different cards and slightly more effectively, and with a dude who's in D. He just got a little bit outclassed, I think, by a card in the literal same set. But I think the Kamehameha deck's really fun, and it's it's the most iconic move in all of anime. So it's cool to have a deck that's based around it, and a dude who leads the deck really well. I think it's fun to make it Goten too. It could have been Goku. That would have been obvious, and Gohan would have been good too. But it's a great place to get Goten a chance to shine. Trunks has a million things that he does or whatever, but Goten is typically just stays in the binder, and this is a cool way to get him into play.
I really like the Goten stack. I really like what the Goten deck is. the Kamehameha cards. The other one's just called Gohan's Kamehameha. It's a promo from Majin Buu Saga, but it's about stacking your discard pile. It is a catch up mechanic, which catch up mechanics are really fun decks, especially for like Tough Enough, I think. And with both of them being focused energies, the focused energies are hard to block. So we've tried a lot of freestyle versions of this. I actually think a styled version that gets to use a mastery but still gets to play things like Blue Kamehameha Blast could be very good. There's definitely a Go 10 deck out there that is really strong. We just haven't found it yet. And part of that's just the amount of reps that get in the league. There's not thousands of games going on every week like there is in still active games. So somebody is going to stumble upon the actual right build for this deck, and it's going to be very strong. Go 10 himself is fun to play. It's a cool effect. It's like you said, it's super iconic, which is great. People want this deck to work. Like if this deck is good, people will be happy this deck is good.
Yes, exactly that. But it's the Kamehameha, man. Like, come on. It's awesome to have that kick-ass. Hey, look, it's the guy we talked about.
Okay, so Tapion is going to have a whole stack in this set. He's going to be a 1-4. So we're going to kind of go over through his entire stack here, and then we'll kind of talk about what he wants to do, although, honestly, it's pretty clear and easy what he wants to do. So, his parenthetical, and this carries over for all of his stack, which is super important, is that if he is your MP, your drills with sword and sword play in the title are not discarded when you advance level. So, the big problem with drill decks is that drill decks can't level. Tapion is going to be about gaining anger, and he wants to level. So he is going to get to keep his sword and swordplay drills as he levels. So his constant for level 1 is going to be whenever you play a card with sword or swordplay in the title, raise your anger 1. Very simple, very generic, very much a let's move on to level 2. So, level 2, you do get to go to D, which D is great. For those of you who hadn't played against Majin Buu a whole lot, D is great. So, he's got 3 PUR, and he's got a constant. Your attacks with sword in the title, again, raise your anger 1. Keeping the anger going, we're going to keep moving him up. Once per combat, when performing an attack, you may discard a card with sword in the title to force your opponent to use 2 cards or effect to stop the attack. So, when is this good, right? Like, this is clearly good in any scenario when you have an if successful effect that's really powerful, right? So if you have a card and you've got an if successful attack that's really strong and you need it to work and you've got some random focused sword slash in your hand, you can pitch it, make them use 2 effects to stop it, and that can get through your if successful so you can get whatever powerful if successful effect you're looking for.
Yeah, if you're grabbing real iconically, right, in a sword deck like Trunks Sword Slice, getting to have that go off and kind of guaranteeing it is really strong. Also, too, to note, it says that your attacks with sword in the title gain raise your anger 1 level. On the first level, your attacks gain you 1 when you play it, so you play it, and then if that was at 4 and you level to 5, you now have a constant power which says that your attacks gain that, so you get an anger off of the attack again that way. So there's a neat little way to cheese a little bit extra anger out of that.
So when you get to level 3 here, your level 3 is still in D, which, again, D is great. It's got a 4 PUR, which is a good amount. And then his constant combat power is cards in your discard pile with sword in the title gain transform, and if successful, you may raise your anger 1. So when we talked earlier about Tapion Swordplay Drill, this is what Tapion Swordplay Drill is all about. Cards in your discard pile with sword in the title gain transform. What this means is if you have Tapion Swordplay Drill in play, all of your sword cards will be styled. So that means you can transform any of them with basically any physical combat or energy combat for some of the sword cards in your deck. So if you're playing a blue beatdown deck and you have blue round throw in your hand, you can turn blue round throw into Trunks Sword Slice with this ability and transform the sword slice and then go get some other sword card. The effect is really strong. This level is incredibly good. If you get to level 3 early enough in the game, the versatility here and the amount of things you can do with this level are incredibly strong. There's a million good targets. There's a lot of good sword cards out there. And, just being able to transform the sword cards so easily is very beneficial. I really like this level. You would, in some decks, you'd be willing to camp this level. It's so strong. Now, the level 4 is so good that you're not going to camp this here, but this is incredibly good.
Yeah, there's If you've paid attention at all to these reviews, if this is like your only familiarity with the NZ sets and like the Z League, and you haven't gotten to experience like using Transform and stuff in person yet, if you've been paying attention to any of the other cards and the way that we have kind of gushed about the way Transform works, giving all of your sword cards Transform and then making them all transform off of that drill with any color card in your hand just creates for some like really flexible gameplay.
So finally, we're at Tapion level 4. He does get to E all the way, which is incredibly strong. E means, 5 damage on the pad, right? So his PUR is 5, which is quite good. And his power is a physical attack that does +1 life cards for each card with sword or sword play in play in your discard pile and removed from the game. That means everywhere. That means your opponent can't stop it. Your opponent can't reduce it. You're getting what you're getting. This is very beneficial because a lot of the sword cards removed from the game after use. You're going to want to have some of them in play, and the rest of them will be piled up in your discard pile. This is, it kind of, I'm a big Pui Pui player, and this kind of inspires me in the same way, whereas the goal is to get to your end level and then just kill them with your end level. So you're on level 4 Tapion, your physical attack here, it's going to do 20 plus life cards a lot of the time. So it doesn't take very many attacks of 20 life cards to kill your opponent. Even if you got, your butt kicked the whole game, this power hitting twice just kills everyone. It's incredibly, it is face up so they can see it, but the good thing about a personality power attack is that they can't stare down it. They can't confro it. They can't get it out of your hand. You're always going to have this every single combat. It's always going to be strong. This is the goal. This is why you level up Tapion, is to try to get to this level so that you can, throw the knockout blow.
Yep, 1,000% that. It's and another thing that's nice with accounting the remove from game pile and stuff too is that with your level 3 being all your cards get transformed, as part of the way transform works is when you transform a card, or cards with transform, all removed from game after use. That's just like part of the rules of transform. So now every one of those cards in your discard pile that you're transforming and pulling out to use, all of them, whether they would have before or not, are getting RFG'd. So counting that pile as well is really, really beneficial. But the fact that it just counts all 3 of the places, like anywhere that a card is visible on the table, it counts it. And it piles up so much. And like Nick said earlier with like the comeback mechanic kind of thing, this is one of those things where like you can just eat 47 life cards of damage and have 26 sword cards in your discard pile, get prep crashed and have all of them gone, and then be like, okay, well, physical for, hang on, let me count my discard pile for 4 minutes here. Okay, yeah, I guess that's a physical for E to B or C or whatever, and then also 26 life cards. Did you die? No? Okay, I guess I'll try again next turn. It's so good, it's so strong, and it puts your opponent on like such a clock. The issue, however, though, as you saw from the other levels, is that you got to get here, right? The one is it's doing nothing, and if you get stuck on the one, you feel bad. Mm-hmm. But it triggers a lot. Getting a sword play drill out is good. There's some fun little like anger combos that you can do where you can play like Gohan's sword slash. Is that what this one's called? The one where you play it. It's a sword card, so you get an anger. Then you search your deck for a sword play drill and play it, which will then get you an anger. So you can kind of string together some anger that way. So that's very handy. If you can pair this up with either a mastery that gains you some anger, or if you can get some value out of other cards that you might have in play that give you kind of recurring anger, it's very, very strong. And just finding a way to get off of the level 1 is good. The level 2 that one, like, there are times that's good, and you can like really make sure that you get a blue colossal throw through that you need to resolve or something like that. But most of the time you're really tooth and nail fighting to get to 3. And if you can be on 3 for long enough, you're gonna get to 4 eventually on its own. If you never get to 4, the 3 is still pretty good. But if you get to the 4, it's just like, all right, you got like a combat or two, and then you are dead. You just gotta hope that your opponent, or you gotta hope your opponent didn't draw a physical block, and your opponent has to pray to God they did, or they're just probably dead. I think Tapion's awesome. He's one of my favorite characters in like the franchise. Probably like my, I don't know, second, whatever. I'm so glad that he has a stack in the game now. It was always a shame to me that that was one of the movies that Score didn't cover. The Tapion stack from Retro did exist and had like a slightly similar idea with the early levels of like getting you anger when you played them, and then having your levels at the top do more for like the sword stuff that you did. Obviously, he's changed very dramatically from the Retro one because they didn't have anything to do with transform and that kind of thing. So once he leaves the kind of like 1 and 2 space, he's sort of totally a different thing. But the inspiration of getting Tapion into the game was a big part of why I wanted this Retro revival thing to exist too. Do you have anything else to add to him, Nick?
I don't believe so. He is a super interesting personality, and I think the whole styled sword deck is like it's close and it's super cool stack. And the more cards that Z print later on could encourage that stack to really take off. Tapion's going to be the main benefactor for that, for sure.
All right. Well, then that takes us into Janemba, the second and last MP stack in its like full stack state included in this set. There's just a 1 through 3 in this stack, and this is also I don't know, 60% or so based off of the concept of the Retro stack. This first level is very similar, if not the same, but it says that when you use a card's printed endurance, or when you use a styled card with printed endurance, place it under your mastery after use. Once per combat, you may place a card from your hand under your mastery to play a card from under your mastery that can perform an attack. It gains removed from the game after use. So already with this level, you can start to see the thing he's doing in the show, or in the movie, I guess, that he's based on. Janemba has these sort of like pocket dimensions that he can like kind of punch through, and then his arm will come out somewhere else, and just very tricky opponent. And his mechanic sort of emulates that in that he's got this kind of pocket dimension underneath his mastery of cards that are just getting stuck there for just playing them or using the endurance on them, and then getting to switch a different card from your hand into one of those to turn it into something else. It's very galaxy-brained deck. There's a ton of things you're setting up and that you have kind of access to in a growing state over the course of the game. And being on top of like when it's right to use this effect, when it's right to put things underneath it, and maximizing that is super prevalent to making this stack work. Notably, too, his power level is insanely high. He is in D off rip 2, so he's just another one of those like giant beaters like Boo is. Going into his level 2, he transforms out of the fat Janemba state into his sort of like full demon form. Constant combat power. When entering combat, place the top card of your discard pile under your mastery. So now that just automatically gets you, one, you lose the putting like kind of every card under there that has endurance and stuff that your level 1 had, but every turn now you're just guaranteeing 1 in there. And then twice per combat now, you can place a card from your hand under your mastery to play a card from your mastery that can perform an attack, and then it gains removed from game after use. Obviously, the remove from game after use additions are so that you can't like continue to loop cards that you're like playing. It has endurance. Oh, I guess that goes back under. You can't do any of that. So, but you still now, instead of just once per turn, you get to do it twice, and you're just getting a guaranteed free card every turn. A little less control over what card it's going to be, but now it can be anything. It doesn't have to just be like one of your endurance cards. So you can start seeing some really unique things show up in your little pile you have access to all game. And then we go finally into Janemba, Pure Evil. He has a constant combat power and a power. The constant one is at the beginning of each turn. You may choose one of your lower level personality powers. Janemba has the chosen power for the remainder of the turn. so you can get your level 1 or 2 effect. And then you have your power. Focus physical attack doing +4 power stages of damage. You may choose a card from under your mastery and place it into your hand. So, with the power itself, you're now no longer gaining a card from anywhere. You sort of have built up this sort of pocket that you have, and that's what you've got. And well, that's not quite true. We'll get to the rest of that in a second. But as far as the power is concerned, that's what you got. So you've got an actual attack on your card now that does damage on its own. But then instead of putting a card from your hand underneath your mastery to pick one up and use it, you now just get to pick one of them and put it into your hand. You also don't have to use it right now, which means you can like grab a block, maybe a time like accidentally ended up under there, and you can now add that to their hand or your hand. There's all kinds of like crazy things that can happen with that. But then with the constant power, at the beginning of each of your turns, letting you pick one of your lower powers, you can now pick this one, which will give you the top card of your deck and the twice per turn do your thing, or your level 1 power, which lets you just do, any number of cards per turn underneath your thing. So it's nice to be able to pick. Do you want to be able to kind of grab one card from your mastery and put it into your hand, and then use this one to grab 2 more with this, so you can do it kind of 3 times in a turn? Or do you just want 2 uses of it with this and your level 3, but just being able to like amplify the number of cards in your stack? So there's a lot of versatility in what you do with the level 3. The Janemba stack, his whole thing is, his most effective state is get to 3 and then start picking, most of the time like your level 1, and depending on how fast you get here, I guess, your level 1 to keep stacking cards underneath there, and then just ripping one out and then a second one each turn with your attack on this level. Or if you just need to start grabbing more cards, your level 2 lets you do that too. As you can see from this power level here on this one too, like I mentioned before, going up to 8.8, he's just massive. So he's just hitting for a ton of damage. He has a ton of options at his disposal floating in his little under mastery card pile. Now, that's sort of like hyper annoying for your opponent because it's not like in play. It's not a card. It's not a thing where they can go, discard a non-combat attached to your mastery or like something like that. It's underneath it, and it's just sort of this like hidden space. It can't be prep crashed, so they're just sort of there. And so, like when you face a Janemba deck, you have to know you've got to kind of be staying on top of what they've got available to them in that little pocket dimension, like I said, and just know that like there's not really a lot you can do right now to get rid of the cards under there. Maybe there will be some cards that will hit cards under stuff eventually. But for right now, those cards are very safe, and Janemba just has access to this like blossoming toolbox all game that gets worse and worse for his opponent as the game goes on.
Yeah, so one of the things that Derek mentioned that I want to gloss back over is the generic power level. He is a very strong personality. He's at very high levels of the PAT. One notable thing is that he has no anger gaining on his stack at all. Obviously, Janemba is a stack that wants to move up, that wants to eventually get to level 3. So you do have to make sure when you're playing Janemba that you need to be focused on a style and a subset of cards that can gain you enough anger to get there. Because if you camp level 1 Janemba all game, you're not going to feel very good about it, right? It's all set up, right? You want to start with level 1, you want to get a few cards going, then you want to move to level 2, you want to get a few more cards going, and then eventually you want to get up to level 3 where you're in G with an attack that's focused and the ability to add one of the 8 to 10 cards that you've put in there over the course of the game into your hand. So that's kind of been Janemba's biggest flaw, is the fact that he needs the anger. So you do need to play him in a style that has that ability, that has the ability to put some anger in there. But otherwise, Janemba's quite strong. His power level's very high. His choices, the actions that he gives you, the choices that he gives you are very good. Anytime that you're, I hate to keep marking on the same thing, but look, he's got boo levels of power. So anytime that you got boo levels of power, it raises your floor significantly. Janemba's a personality that you can put in most physical beats decks and feel okay about it, And orange is especially a color that, I really like with Janemba. It's got a lot of endurance, so you can trigger his level 1 pretty well. But
yeah, you could get into black and some of the good black cards and try to set them up for your level 2 to where they're the top card of your discard pile, so you can put them in from that. So, whichever style you choose with Janemba is going to kind of lean on how you want to play the stack. But overall, the stack is quite good. He is more of a tough enough stack. He's 1 to 3. He does not gain a lot of anger. So generally speaking, you're going to want to lean more into tough enough. And he's just a big beater, right? So, big beaters generally find their way into tough enough more often than not. But Janemba's a fun stack. He's a villain. He's you get to play a lot of the good villains only cards, and you should definitely give Janemba a shot. He's a little difficult to play. The learning curve for him is quite large. There's a lot of things to remember and a lot of decision points, but definitely a very strong personality.
All right. Well, that then is the last card in the actual NZ5 Resurrection set. There's one more card that we kind of included along the release folder of this set. We do in the Z League here, we have like an organized play system over the year where we would do, like we call them main events, where you can get like, what we did for the year that this next card's for is if you win the main events that we have throughout the year, you got a Worlds invite, which is what we called it, and it was just like an invite only, like basically top 8 for the year tournament, and at the end of the year, those 8 players, we all got online. We all watched everyone like play out their little top 8 bracket. It was really, really fun. It was super hyped to like fight for those invites all year long and see like the struggle of people trying to get them. And the winner of that Worlds event, each year we let that person design a card to be included with the NZ sets. Now Worlds happens kind of like October, November, December-ish kind of time of year, and every year the NZ sets come out on June 21st and December 25th. So the card that they design comes out like alongside that December 25th set. So here we have that Worlds card, created by, in this case, Worlds finalist Chuck Hill. We call it the 2023 Z League Worlds. So this was about a year and a half ago now. But it is Guru, the Elder Namekian. Constant combat power, your allies gain +1 power stage during the power-up step. If Nail or Dende are in play, you may play allies 1 level higher than your main personality's level, and you may use this power regardless of your MP's power rating. So, as we talked with Chuck about, what it was that he wanted some Namekian support. He wanted to see, some allies do some interesting stuff. And as we kind of pieced the card together, we got, we started with like an attack that did something, and then we kind of pivoted into like, well, Guru's a cool Namekian who is like super relevant to the show. He doesn't have a card at all. And, well, I get, Guru is your ally, Guru Fades or whatever is like a card, but not a personality card. So it felt like a slot that was like sorely missing. So we went ahead and pieced together the idea that he liked. Having your allies get an extra PUR is really strong for just having more stages to redirect to or to pay for attacks. A lot of the allies do energy attacks, so making them, basically, even if they get to 0, this is going to get them to 2 start each turn, which means they're all going to have their energies online, which is good. And then Nail or Dende being in play, letting you play allies that are a little higher. We have a Dende that we made as well in one of our NZ sets that kind of does something similar, and so this lets you just kind of double up on that power and have a little more access to that. You get this regardless of your power rating. So it's cool that he kind of captures the thing Guru does of like releasing the potential or whatever of characters, so it lets you play, the level 2s of your Krillins and Gohans and stuff. But he's just sort of nice for just ally deck support. He fits really nice into like a Spirit Bomb deck. He fits really nice into just your generic kind of like ally beater deck, and just helping them get a little extra stages and play some like more interesting ones. There's a lot you can do with this card, and I think it was a very cool, community world champion created card. I think the balance is like pretty there. It's not, like, oh wow, they made some like broken thing. And even then, like, as part of the process, we say like, we're going to work on it with you and make sure you don't just like write down something absurd, gain a 50 anger and do 4,000 damage or something. Like, you can't make some like nonsense thing. But I think this is still a card that's very, I think it's interesting and it does cool stuff, and it's got a welcome place in the decks that like it.
Yeah, so you mentioned the main deck, which is the Air Spirit Bomb deck. That deck has always been kind of more meme than it is realistic deck. This card's helped a lot with that. There's a couple of cards that have been printed that really help the go all the way wide ally strategy, and this one's great. If you're playing 8 to 10 plus allies, you're going to play Guru probably, which is great. It's a niche card. It's not going to fit into a ton of decks, but the decks that it does fit in, it's very good in. The other deck that usually jumps off to me is Piccolo Fused. This does count as the Namekian for Piccolo Fused, and I think that the Piccolo Fused decks are a little bit better as heroes. Unfortunately, there are, because of people like Cell, more villain allies. There tend to be more villain allies, but having Guru kind of helps offset that, and you can, now you've got Guru and Nail and Dende and a couple of Namekians that you can use to go up to Piccolo Fuse, which is an incredibly strong power. So, there's a couple of good uses for this card. I mean, I myself have played it in my Spirit Bomb deck. I like it a lot. The stage gain is incredible. You hit them with a barrage of energy attacks, and then, you gain one stage, and now your guys can't do their energies. Well, Guru makes them let every single one of your turns you can fire off your energy with your guys, which is great. So, this card's been great. It's a good time. I really love the design. I like what Chuck did here, so very happy with this card.
Yeah, shout out Chuck. Well done, man. Congrats on your tournament world's finalist position there, as well as making a super interesting card. That's it, guys. That's all we've got for this set. We are 3 hours into the total combined review of this set. There's a lot of cards in this set, and a lot of them do a lot of interesting stuff, so there's just a lot to say. So if you've made it to this point, if this is the first video of set 5 that you've watched, you checked out the short one first, go see the long one. That one's good too. If you watched the long one first and you made it this far, congrats, more power to you. Pat yourself on the back. It's a big endurance test there. But thanks for hanging out with us while we go over these. I think it's really beneficial to kind of like deep dive into some of the way that these cards are, what they do, what they're for, sort of why we made them, and open people's eyes to them a little bit more. There are a lot of people playing more NZ cards, and more of them, every day. But there's still a lot of people who are still kind of foreign to just some of the cards that are legal in the space around them. So we thought it'd be nice to kind of put these together and just keep getting everyone on the same page. And I think it's a good way to do that. So thanks for watching. We'll be back with our NZ Set 6 review in the near future. See you next time.
See you guys.